We see the same principle at work in recent history. The African nation of Malawi has been one of the poorest in the world. But in the past decade, Malawi's rapid adoption of mobile phones has had a powerful positive impact on its development. Economically handicapped by its minimal landline telephone infrastructure, Malawi leapfrogged directly to cellular beginning in 2006 by creating a national ICT for development policy that encouraged investment in mobile infrastructure and removed barriers to adoption, for example, by eliminating import taxes on mobile phones. As a result, mobile phone penetration has dramatically risen, which in turn has enabled the growth of local mobile payments businesses. With 80% of the population unbanked, this has made such payments all the more important. Today, Malawi has a higher penetration of mobile payments among mobile phone users than many developed countries. Likewise, Rwanda's Vision 2020 initiative has helped to turn around the nation's economy and education system by promoting greater access to mobile connectivity and the cloud. Startups like Textit, which enables companies worldwide to engage with their customers through cloud-based SMS and voice apps, represents new hope for growth in this troubled nation. This question of technology diffusion, the spread of technology, and its impact on economic outcomes has always fascinated me. How can we make technology available to everyone, and then how can we ensure that it works to benefit everyone? In my quest for an answer, I invited Dartmouth economist Diego Comín to spend an afternoon with me at my office in Redmond, Washington. Professor Comín is soft-spoken and weighs his words carefully, relying on the precision and thoroughness of his knowledge to carry conviction. He has painstakingly studied the evolution of technology diffusion over the last 2 centuries in countries throughout the world. Comín and economist Bart Hobergin spent years producing the cross-country historical adoption of technology (CHAT) dataset, which examines the time frame over which 161 countries adopted 104 technologies from steam power to PCs. They found that on average, countries tend to adopt a new technology about 45 years after its invention, although this time lag has shortened in recent years. Based on this analysis, Comín agrees that differences between rich and poor nations can largely be explained by the speed at which they adopted industrial technologies. But equally important, he says, is the intensity they employ in putting new technologies to work. Even when countries that were slow to adopt new technologies eventually catch up, it's the intensity of how they use the technology, not simply the access, that creates economic opportunity. Are the technologies just sitting there, or is the workforce trained to get the most productivity out of them? That's intensity. The question is not just when these technologies arrive, but the intensity of their use, Professor Comín told me. David Mackenzie of the World Bank puts it another way. He finds the need for more intensive training programs that have larger effects on business practices. Small firms with fewer than 10 employees outnumber large enterprises in developing countries, and their likelihood of surviving and growing is greatly enhanced when they know how to perform better stock keeping, record keeping, and planning, which may result in less spoilage and less downtime that comes from not having the right parts or goods. That too is intensity of use. During my journey to the Middle East, I'd also visited the Nazar city district of Cairo, Egypt. There I encountered a room full of bright, optimistic young women who had graduated from some of the nation's far-flung colleges and universities. They had come to meet me at a training center our company supports, along with partners like the United Nations and the Women's Business Development Center. Nestled among international company offices in a district close to the airport, the center is part of our Youth Spark initiative, which has helped more than 300 million young people intensively access computer science and entrepreneurial training. The young women explained to me some of the projects they'd been working on. One team had decided to help some of the 115,000 refugees from war-torn Syria who had poured into Egypt since 2013. They'd built an app to help them find assistance upon their arrival in Egypt. But it was another group's project that really fascinated me. One group built an experience that digitally transforms the relationship between pharmacies and patients by making it easier, faster, and more affordable to find the pharmacy nearest you with the medications or supplies you need. Earlier in the day, I'd met an Egyptian entrepreneur who had built a similar app for locating the right doctor. In combination, they reminded me very much of ZocDoc, a New York City-based company that provides similar healthcare services. ZocDoc became one of the celebrated American unicorns, non-public tech startup companies worth $1 billion or more. What I was witnessing firsthand was how quickly technology is diffused. Egyptian entrepreneurs were creating their own unicorns, even if they did not enjoy the lofty valuations of US startups. The core reason they were able to do so was because the cloud technology that enabled these innovations was now available to them without the need to invest a lot of capital. Unfortunately, in many underserved parts of the world, public and private attention is focused on attracting Silicon Valley companies rather than on growing local tech entrepreneurs. Successful entrepreneurs in developing nations often tell me they can't even get meetings with their president or prime minister. Yet those same heads of state routinely meet with Western CEOs like me, looking for very near-term, foreign direct investment. That's a short-sighted policy and very frustrating for the business leaders who are trying to nurture the long-term prospects of their local and national economies. And yet I see this mindset everywhere, in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and even in struggling communities in G20 nations like the United States. The resulting failure of governments to encourage rapid and intensive use of new technologies means that the trend toward growing economic inequality between the haves and the have-nots of the world has continued unabated. To get a measure of how equitable or inequitable our world is, economists turn to the work of an Italian economist named Corrado Gini, who in 1912 published his formula for calculating what has become known as the Gini coefficient, which measures the difference between a society's division of income and a perfectly equal division of income. It's really quite elegant. If 100% of a given population were to earn $1 per day, that would be absolute equality. If 100% earned $1 million per year, that too would be absolute equality. But when only 1% earn $1 million while everyone else earns nothing, we're approaching absolute inequality. Gini's work provides a way of measuring the degree to which the income distribution in a given society approaches or diverges from perfect equality. The Gini coefficient for a particular population is generally expressed as a fraction. Perfect equality would be represented by a value of 0, while maximum inequality would be represented by a value of 1. In the real world, the Gini coefficient for any given country or region is expressed by a fraction somewhere in between those two extremes. The Gini coefficient for an advanced European country like Germany has hovered around 0.3 for decades, while the figure for the United States has risen for years, now matching that of China and Mexico at over 0.4. Of course, most economists agree that perfect income equality is neither possible nor desirable. Capitalist economies reward qualities like innovation, risk-taking, and hard work, qualities that generate value, produce wealth, and usually lead to benefits for many people throughout the society. When rewards flow to the people who exhibit those qualities, unequal income distribution is the inevitable result. Edward Conard, a founding partner of Bain Capital, carries the argument even further in The Upside of Inequality. Conard concludes that inequality ultimately leads to faster growth and greater prosperity for everyone. Investors wait for good ideas that create their own demand for properly trained talent needed to commercialize ideas successfully. He sees two constraints on growth: an economy's capacity and willingness to take risk, and to find properly trained and motivated talent. But excessive inequality has the perverse effect of reducing incentives for many people. What happens when people work more and yet make less money? It is discouraging, leading many people to slacken their efforts, abandon dreams of launching or expanding businesses, and perhaps to leave the workforce altogether. It also weakens overall economic activity. For businesses like mine, it means our global customers have less to spend on emerging technologies that could make them more productive. That is what's happening today. There is a sagging line below Gini's perfect 45-degree angle that represents growing inequality. I want to avoid the pitfalls of what Marx described as late-stage capitalism, a theoretical time when economic growth and profits collapse, and get back to the returns enjoyed in early-stage capitalism. But how? That's the question most heads of state around the world are also grappling with. In computer science and engineering, we search for something called the global maxima. It's a mathematical phrase describing the optimal state, the highest point of a function. Where technology is concerned, I would argue that the global maxima for every region of the world, a country, county, or community, should be to import the latest world-class technologies in order to fuel innovation and growth among that nation or region's entrepreneurs, to drive both exports and local consumption of these innovations with intensity across sectors and segments of society. In other words, focus on adding value as well as broad use to help generate surplus and opportunity for more and more citizens. This means every region in both developed and developing countries must grow industries in which they have comparative economic advantage with use of new technology inputs. Business leaders and policymakers need to ask, what do we have that others do not have? And how can we turn that unique advantage into a source of growth and wealth for all our people? China has clearly done this with proactive industrial policy that supports their entrepreneurs and economy across manufacturing and consumer internet services. China strategically used the global supply chain and their own domestic market to amplify their comparative advantage and bootstrap their economic growth. The combination of industrial policy, public sector investment, and entrepreneurial energy is what many other countries will also look to replicate from China's success. I see the beginnings of this in India with the creation of the new digital ecosystem known as India Stack. India is leapfrogging from once being an infrastructure-poor country to now leading in digital technology. India Stack ushers in a presence-less, cashless, paperless economy for all its citizens. On a trip to Bengaluru, I engaged in a conversation with Nandan Nilekani about India Stack and its future roadmap. Nandan is the legendary founder of Infosys, who went on to create a new startup working with the Indian government, Aadhaar, the identity system that is at the center of India Stack. Aadhaar now has scaled to over 1 billion people, rivaling the growth of other platform innovations such as Windows, Android, or Facebook. E.L.V.I.S, a startup that was acquired by Practo, is a leading e-health company in India. I met the founder of E.L.V.I.S on the same trip to Bengaluru. They are using the latest cloud technology and AI from Microsoft to create a state-of-the-art healthcare diagnostic service that can, for example, detect an atrial fibrillation event before it happens because of the rich data going from the personal device of the patient directly to the cloud. In turn, this cloud service can be made available to hospitals in smaller towns or rural areas in India. E.L.V.I.S also has plans to take advantage of India Stack to authenticate the user, accept payment, create portal medical records, and much more. This Indian innovation is now looking to expand in the United States, Africa, and everywhere else. This dynamic is not unique to China or India. I saw this across Chile, Indonesia, and Poland, and also in France, Germany, and Japan. Reflecting on my earlier visit to Egypt, it's clear they are investing in human capital. Egypt has an ancient heritage of science, math, and technology, and its universities have produced physicians who work throughout the Arab world. So healthcare turns out to be one of Egypt's areas of comparative advantage. The young entrepreneurs I met who have built apps for finding doctors and pharmacies are exploiting valuable synergies to create a powerful ecosystem, which is part of the magic of modern technology. Now they need affordable, powerful cloud services, which can come from Microsoft or another large-scale cloud provider. The right policy framework can help give their ideas flight. Unfortunately, many governments have been resistant to embrace new technologies like the cloud, even after they begin to reach scale in other parts of the world. In some cases, they try to pursue technology strategies that are self-defeating. For example, government leaders sometimes cite security, privacy, complexity, control, and latency, delayed processing, as reasons for building their own proprietary cloud rather than adopting an existing technology that has been made affordable by multinational demand. Newly attuned to these issues and to the severe economic consequences they can produce, I returned from my Middle East trip with a renewed sense of energy and duty. I got off the airplane, marched into my office, and rallied our team to think through a set of recommendations and a policy framework to help governments, both developed and developing, reduce barriers to technology adoption and use. So back to the questions I posed earlier in this chapter. Are we growing? Are we growing evenly? And what is the role of technology? There is, of course, no silver bullet. But as I consider all of the evidence and reflect on my own experiences, I keep returning to this simplified equation. Sigma, education plus innovation, multiplied by intensity of tech use, equals economic growth. Education plus innovation, applied broadly across the economy and especially in sectors where the country or region has a comparative advantage, multiplied by the intense use of technology over time, produces economic growth and productivity. In the digital age, software acts as a universal input that can be produced in abundance and applied across both public and private sectors and every industry from agriculture to healthcare and manufacturing. Regardless of location, Detroit, Egypt, or Indonesia, this new input needs to turn into local economic surplus. Breakthrough technologies plus a workforce trained to use them productively, multiplied by the intensity of their use, spreads economic growth and opportunity. To make that happen, leaders need to prioritize entrepreneurship in several major ways. The first is providing broad access to internet connectivity and cloud computing services to all citizens. Today, such access is extremely variable. Internet penetration is close to 100% in Korea, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, but below 2% in a number of sub-Saharan African nations. Unless we take specific steps to make access universal, by 2020, just 16% of people in the world's poorest countries and only 53% of the total global population will be connected to the internet. At this rate, universal internet access in low-income nations won't be achieved until 2042, and with no internet access, there is no cloud access. To expand internet access, countries might adopt policies to facilitate the sharing of underutilized spectrum, such as TV whitespace, an approach that is currently being successfully used in some developing countries. In addition, governments should lower restrictions on foreign direct investments in telecommunications, mobile, and broadband infrastructure, as well as reform other investment policies that erect barriers in the way of entrepreneurs willing to enter the market. Policies that encourage public-private partnerships and recognize the structuring needs of funding institutions are needed to facilitate access to capital for expanding internet infrastructure. Leaders at every level, from national to community level, should foster not just fast but intense adoption of new technologies that can drive productivity. As Professor Komin told me, you don't have to invent the wheel, but you should adopt it quickly because societies that utilize new tools quickly are likely to be more productive. Another high priority area is fostering human capital and next-generation skills development. Building knowledge allows workers to keep up with the increasing pace of technology. As the digital transformation automates many tasks formerly handled by people, workers need the skills that will enable them to become managers of the new automated tools. Just as workers wielding shovels gave way to workers capable of driving bulldozers, societies now need people with the skills to manage fleets of automated bulldozers, self-driving cars, and drones. To this end, government must demonstrate empathy for all of its constituents and work to create a more knowledge-based economy. The pathway to new technologies requires a parallel investment in skills development, making sure people have the requisite skills to participate in an increasingly digital society, one that depends on smart devices and online services. In schools, this requires promoting digital literacy and making sure that teachers and students have access to technology and learning tools at low cost. In the workplace, we need to invest in lifelong learning with a focus on programs and investments that promote upskilling for the cloud and a more digital-ready workforce. Companies like Microsoft are already expanding their educational capacity and building initiatives to accelerate such skills development, especially at small and medium-sized enterprises. Knowledge is necessary to find new uses for new technologies, and that knowledge is accumulated through training and experience. Every country is different, but Germany provides an excellent example of the productive use of new technologies. Germany and the United States both invest heavily in R&D, but Germany has enjoyed greater rates of productivity growth. Why? One explanation is the German system of vocational training through apprenticeship, which makes cutting-edge technologies available to the workforce quickly through vocational schools that have close relationships with industry. I am convinced the only way to tackle economic displacement is to make sure that we provide skills training not only to people coming out of college and other post-secondary programs, but also to workers who are losing their jobs to automation. Countries that invest in building technology skills as a percent of GDP will see the rewards. Policy reforms must also create a regulatory environment that promotes innovative and confident adoption and use of technology. While data privacy and security are always key concerns, they also need to be balanced against the demands for data to flow more freely across borders and between the various services that make up a modern, global digital economy. Governments have been strong advocates for promoting digital security to protect the community from harm. However, our experience is that public policy and regulation in this area needs reform to ensure the right balance is struck. This is by no means easy, but Microsoft and other leaders in our industry have extensive experience helping governments modernize their regulatory frameworks to achieve this balance and help promote public safety and national security without compromising the benefits of these digital services for the public and private sectors and millions of citizens. Additionally, every government has an opportunity to lead by example in embracing technology for the provision of services to citizens, improving productivity in the public sector, and leveraging its comparative advantage. Public sector leadership should be complemented by efforts to showcase local entrepreneurship and leading-edge technologies, including providing financial incentives where appropriate. As leaders ask themselves, where can we be the best in the world? The answers might be surprising. Desert farming in Australia or local banking in Dubai. Some other country or community might strive to become the world's leader for innovations in IoT, ambient intelligence, mobile payment systems, virtual reality, silicon photonics, 3D printing, wearables, lightweight, low-altitude satellites, drones, native advertising, driverless cars, robotics and industrial automation, adaptive, gamified education, nanomachines, genomics, or economical solar, wind, and tidal power. Each represents an opportunity for leadership that no single community or region has yet seized. Seattle, for example, has become the center of excellence for cloud computing as the home of both Amazon and Microsoft. An inspiring idea in this context is the notion of a charter or startup city, an idea put forth by economist Paul Romer. Romer posits that rules and laws, which are hard to change and require concessions to be approved, are not optimized for spurring innovation and creating economic growth. Charter cities, on the other hand, are experimental reform zones engineered entirely to create jobs and growth. Citizens could opt in or not. Some will be ready and some won't. His illustration is Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Hong Kong, located in China but ruled for generations by Great Britain, was free of anti-market communist rule and became an economic engine, attracting and training workers. Deng Xiaoping, grasping that China needed to become more open in order to grow, created a de facto charter city in nearby Shenzhen, which could take advantage of its neighbors' talent pool and infrastructure. Unlike the rest of China, Shenzhen's rules would be attractive to foreign investment and international trade. He knew that communist China would be slow to embrace these reform zones, but many entrepreneurs and workers would leap at the opportunity. Shenzhen grew from a town of 30,000 people to a global financial center of nearly 11 million residents after it was designated as a special economic zone in 1980. We also need to continue to promote free and fair trade. If we want to see growth and see it more broadly, opening up more markets and clearing barriers to trade for entrepreneurs is an essential step. It's unfortunate that in recent years, populist politicians on both the left and the right have campaigned on pledges to overturn free trade agreements. Governor John Kasich of Ohio, in the midst of a bitter 2016 presidential campaign, wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal arguing that a vote against trade is a vote against growth. He pointed out that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, a major trade agreement that was pending approval in Washington at the time, is about helping large and small companies find growth in Japan, Australia, Canada, Chile, and other Pacific Rim nations that want to increase trade with America. The world needs continued progress on trade liberalization. Kasich pointed out that 40 million US jobs depend on trade, but our trade laws also need to be modernized. In this digital economy, the bits and bytes imported and exported are as critical to trade as the automobiles, agricultural products, and other goods we trade. We need to be able to transfer data across borders in the course of business and do so without having to locate computing facilities in every territory while protecting privacy, source code, and other forms of intellectual property. The 2016 campaigns brought new attention to the challenges and benefits of trade agreements. Despite a lot of noise, all of the candidates said that they thought trade was good, but each had differing views. Trump on the right and Sanders on the left suggested massive job loss. Clinton focused on the need for stronger enforcement. Business leaders argued that trade deals have been net job creators, though I am sympathetic with the view that those gains need to be distributed more evenly. To complaints that trade agreements are bad for the environment, supporters have pointed out that TPP is the first multilateral trade deal to include enforceable provisions for environmental protection. To be sure, the basic rules-based framework for economic relations between nations that were established at the end of World War II through the Bretton Woods system provides a good but imperfect foundation on which to build. The framework continues to form the foundational principles for closer cooperation with like-minded countries through networks of free trade agreements. But trade agreements will only continue to be successful if they are seen in the broader context of economic policies for growth. Finally, questions are being asked about whether this next industrial revolution will be a jobless one. To help us investigate this question, MIT economist Daron Acemoglu visited our campus to report on his research into the effects of technology automation on labor. He found that new intelligent machines, particularly industrial robots, could have very consequential effects on the labor market. His estimates suggest that on average, each additional industrial robot reduces employment by about 3 workers. This suggests that without any countervailing changes, the spread of industrial robots could have very adverse consequences for jobs and wages. Nevertheless, Acemoglu argues that other powerful changes triggered by this onslaught could at least partly reverse these consequences. As machines replace labor in some tasks, firms will be incentivized to create new tasks in which humans have a comparative advantage. Acemoglu sums it up this way. Although automation tends to reduce employment and the share of labor in national income, the creation of more complex tasks has the opposite effect. Throughout history, new classes of workers and new, more complex tasks have resulted from cutting-edge technologies. Acemoglu continues, the creation of new complex tasks always increases wages, employment, and share of labor. But when automation runs ahead of the process of creation of new, labor-intensive tasks, technological change will bring lower employment. We need a balanced growth path. We need to invent a new social contract for this age of AI and automation that fosters the equilibrium between individual labor, one's agency, wages, sense of purpose and fulfillment, and the return on capital. One such example is Kent International, maker of Bicycle Corporation of America branded bikes, which made news early in 2017 when it moved 140 jobs from China back to Manning, South Carolina, where the company had invested in robotics to automate many of the tasks once performed by people. What was once a low-tech, high-labor business is going through its own digital transformation and plans. CEO Arnold Kamler told me he plans to add 40 jobs per year, which is considerable growth in a small town. In fact, a number of states competed to land the plant. A lot of people have that misconception that automation decreases jobs, a production manager on the line said. It's just a different type of job, a more skilled job. Without the robots, the human jobs wouldn't exist. One of the reasons I was so excited about our acquisition of LinkedIn, the talent and employment-oriented social networking service, was a shared commitment we discovered early in our negotiations. In conversations with LinkedIn's founder, Reid Hoffman, and its CEO, Jeff Weiner, I discovered we had a common desire to use our digital platforms to spread opportunity more equitably to everyone. In fact, the New Yorker magazine has written about LinkedIn's vision of making labor markets work better for all 3 billion members of the global workforce by making those markets more efficient and open. This dream of a more accessible and equitable economic playing field won't come true automatically. In his book, The Startup of You, Hoffman writes about the forces of competition and change that brought down Detroit as an economic powerhouse. No matter what city you live in, no matter what business or industry you work for, no matter what kind of work you do, when it comes to your career, right now, you may be heading down the same path as Detroit. What we aspire to do through LinkedIn is to build a network of alliances to help provide the intelligence on opportunities, training resources, and collective action we all can take to create economic opportunity for individuals. In this way, we hope to ensure that other cities in the future won't suffer the same fate as Detroit, and in fact, just as Detroit did, other cities can shape their own successful reinventions as thriving centers of enterprise and job creation for decades to come. I do have a bias for which I am unapologetic. It is a bias for driving investment toward technological advancements in services like LinkedIn and Office that help people create, connect, and become more productive rather than software that is simply entertaining, memes for conspicuous consumption. Spillover effects on the economy are pretty limited for technologies that don't foster a more equitable ratio of consumption to creation. Nonetheless, Wall Street has put a lot of value recently on these consumption technologies. Robert Gordon's recent economic treatise, Rise and Fall of American Growth, has its central thesis that some inventions are more important than others. I agree, and I would put today's productivity software in that category. Gordon examines American growth between 1870 and 1940, describing a century of economic revolution that freed households from an unremitting daily grind of painful manual labor, household drudgery, darkness, isolation, and early death. It was a transformation unique in human history, unrepeatable because so many of its achievements could happen only once. Looking over the great expanse of American economic history, Gordon concludes that innovation is the ultimate source of such dramatic changes. Entrepreneurs contribute to economic growth far more than the narrow word innovation can convey, he writes. And education, he further notes, is innovation's closest cousin in fueling growth. John Battelle, Wired's co-founding editor, once wrote that business is humanity's most resilient, iterative, and productive mechanism for creating change in the world. He is right, and we business leaders need to take seriously our responsibilities as change leaders. I don't say this for purposes of so-called corporate social responsibility, which is important but can also serve as little more than good PR. I say it because a better world is better for business. It's important to be dedicated to creating great products, serving customers, and earning profits for our investors. But it's not sufficient. We also need to think about the impact of our actions on the world and its citizens long into the future.
And now, let's hear from Satya reading the afterword and his acknowledgements.
Afterward. Why do I exist? Why does our institution exist? What's the role of a multinational corporation in our world? What is the role of a leader in digital technology, especially as the world turns to tech as such a crucial input to drive growth? These questions haunt me. They motivated me to write Hit Refresh. Finding answers set me on an intellectual and introspective journey to discover what I uniquely can contribute to society and how to rediscover the soul of Microsoft, to define our role as a global company. They guide me daily in the pursuit to bring empathy together with big ideas in order to make a real difference. Hopefully, the stories and lessons along the course of my journey have produced something useful to you in your own life and work. I also hope these existential questions spark conversations among policymakers, business leaders, and technologists. In an often divided world that is careening towards ever more dramatic technological, economic, demographic, and even climatic shifts, we have to redefine the role of multinational corporations and the role of leadership. Anti-globalization movements like Brexit and populist political campaigns in both America and Europe have raised important questions and concerns ranging from automation, trade, and economic opportunity to fairness and whom to trust. Economist Richard Baldwin, author of The Great Convergence, writes that the origin of today's anti-globalization sentiment in the wealthiest nations lies in the fact that their share of world income has plummeted from 70% in 1990 to 46% in just the past 2 decades. In other words, wealthy nations like the United States, France, Germany, and the UK have witnessed a large drop in their share of world income. The combination of low wages and information technologies that radically lowered the cost of moving ideas has meant that places like China and India have significantly gained in the share of world income, while rich nations are now back to 1914 levels, igniting anti-globalization feelings in some quarters. Baldwin predicts a third wave of globalization will come when telepresence and telerobotics, like HoloLens, really good substitutes for people crossing borders to provide services, become affordable. As this book was going to press, Nobel economist Angus Deaton and his wife Anne Case, also a distinguished economist at Princeton, published a paper that found whites in the U.S. who have less than a college degree experience cumulative disadvantages over the course of their lives that can negatively impact their mortality, health, and economic well-being. In fact, their research found that it is education more than income that explains increases in mortality and morbidity among whites in midlife. This dynamic, coupled with Baldwin's findings, have at least in part fueled today's anti-globalist fervor and as a result now invite introspection on both our public education and public health priorities. Of course, the goal is to grow the pie for everyone. GE's Jeff Immelt provided his answer to the role of today's multinational in a 2016 speech to the Stern School of Business at New York University. He reflected on the role played by global companies during his 30-year career. During that time, the rate of extreme poverty had been cut in half, and technological innovations had dramatically improved healthcare, reduced the cost of energy, and connected people like never before. Yet today, Immelt observed, big companies are seen as failing, along with governments, to address the world's challenges. In response, Immelt announced that GE intends to pivot because greater equality is good both for business and for society. GE plans to adopt policies designed to help level the playing field globally. GE will localize, that is, it will grow local capabilities within the company's global footprint, making space for greater local decision-making in a more comprehensive local context. I agree. More than half of Microsoft's revenues are from outside the United States. We can't do business effectively in 190 countries unless we prioritize the creation of greater local economic opportunity in each of those countries. We've invested more than $15 billion in constructing third of the world's most sophisticated regional data centers, positioning them to support local entrepreneurship and public sector services in North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and Europe. In each of these regions, we have to operate with responsibility. Real business success, in fact, capitalism generally, cannot be just the surplus that you create for your own core constituency, but also the broader surplus that is created to benefit the wider society. The way I look at it, multinationals can no longer be the memes they have become, soulless, bloodless entities that enter a nation or a region simply to take rent from the locals. The job of a multinational is more important than ever. It needs to operate everywhere in the world, contributing to local communities in positive ways, sparking growth, competitiveness, and opportunity for all. How can we help our local partners and startups grow? How can we help the public sector become more efficient? How can we help solve the most pressing issues in society, like access to education and health? Every country, naturally, thinks about its own national interest first. America first in America, India first in India. the UK first in the UK. The priority of a global company should be to operate in each of these countries with the goal of creating local opportunity in long-term, sustainable ways. We all must do this while staying steadfastly anchored in our timeless values. Microsoft is a company born in America. Our heritage has shaped our values. We believe in the American dream, both in living it out as employees and helping others do the same. Our allegiance is to a set of enduring values: privacy, security, free speech, opportunity, diversity, and inclusion. We live by them, and will stand for them when challenged in America and elsewhere. Multinational corporations that create technology have an even higher bar for creating economic opportunity as the next wave of technologies take hold. The coming industrial revolution, one that builds towards ubiquitous computing and ambient intelligence and is fueled by software, will be more profound in its impact on the economy than those revolutions that came before. It's why I developed a set of design principles that shape how we, Microsoft and others, create this next wave of technology. I encourage feedback, debate, and ultimately commitment to building out the ethics that will govern our society going forward. The world used to grow at 4% per year, but it is now growing at roughly 2%. So we need new technology breakthroughs in order to have the type of growth we had in the 20th century. Mixed reality, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing are going to be game changers, creating new economic surplus, but also disrupting the workforce, eliminating the routine jobs we take for granted today. Some argue that robots will take all our jobs, but this so-called lump of labor argument, the notion that there is a limited amount of work available, has always been disproved. It's just that different types of labor will be needed, and humans will add value where machines cannot. As we encounter more and more artificial intelligence, real empathy, and real common sense will be scarce. The new jobs will be predicated on knowing how to work with machines, but also on these uniquely human attributes. In the face of these many coming shifts, there must be a new social contract that helps to achieve economic surplus and opportunity on a more equitable basis. To get there, what will the new labor movement look like? There has been talk of a universal basic income. How will we reskill and retrain workers, not just high-end knowledge workers, but also low-skill and mid-skill labor? Can the service sector and people-on-people jobs be the source of new employment for many displaced from traditional manufacturing or agricultural sectors? Finally, as leaders, what is our role? At the end of the day, leaders of any company are evaluated based on their ability to grow the business, to clear the way for innovations that inspire customers. As CEOs, we are accountable for generating the best returns to shareholders. But I also subscribe to the notion that the bigger a company is, the more responsibility its leader has to think about the world, its citizens, and their long-term opportunities. You're not going to have much of a stable business if you don't think about the growing inequities around the world and do your part to help improve conditions for everyone. We approach this goal by focusing on multiple strategies and constituencies, leveraging our core business for positive social impact and improving personal productivity, making sure our business is socially responsible by investing in sustainability, accessibility, privacy, and security, and through philanthropy. Microsoft Philanthropies is the world's largest corporate philanthropy with more than $1 billion in contributions across a wide variety of causes, including teaching digital skills like coding and computer science, affordable access to the internet, and humanitarian assistance. And we use our voice under the banner of a cloud for global good to advocate for policies that advance the goal of economic opportunity for everyone. In fact, all of my proceeds from this book will go towards these causes. Earlier I wrote that the C in CEO is about being the curator of culture. After all, it really comes down to people. It's the sum of 1 million decisions made by thousands of people every day. It is about helping employees live out their own personal mission in the context of Microsoft's. Microsoft no longer employs people, people employ Microsoft. What is possible to achieve when we shift the mindset of more than 100,000 people from being employees to employers? Our entire purpose is to make things that help others make things and make things happen. Our services are irreplaceable tools in countless enterprises and organizations around the world. Anybody at Microsoft can look at our constellation of assets and dream of what can be and bring it to bear on any problem in any geography. We are providing the resources countless people can use to build something that will outlast themselves, whether that's a small business, a school, a clinic, or a giant enterprise creating jobs and opportunity for millions. This culture needs to be a microcosm of the world we hope to create outside the company. One where builders, makers, and creators achieve great things. But equally important, one where every individual can be their best self, where diversity of skin color, gender, religion, and sexual orientation is understood and celebrated. I know that we are on the right track when I hear a colleague express an insight that could only come from empathy, or when a product breakthrough results from someone who used Microsoft as a platform for his or her personal passion and creativity. What does it mean to hit refresh? I encourage you to answer that for yourself. Start the conversation in your institution, start the conversation in your community, and please share with me what you learn, and I'll continue to do the same. Acknowledgements. I've often said that the best lines of computer code are like poetry. The writer struggles to compress so much thought and feeling into the fewest lines possible while still communicating the fullness of expression. Although the prose we have written here does not approach poetry, the writing process was nonetheless intense and in the end rewarding. For that, there are many people to thank. As I wrote in my dedication, I owe so much to 2 families. At home, Anu and our 3 beautiful children, as well as our parents back in India. My other family has been Microsoft. For more than 2 decades, I owe a lot to Bill Gates, Paul Allen, and Steve Ballmer, who together created the opportunity for all of us at Microsoft to innovate, scale, and serve customers around the world. I've admired and learned from each of them throughout my career. Our senior leadership team is my partner in this continuing transformation, and I want to offer them my most sincere thanks and appreciation. Judson Althoff, Chris Capocella, Jean-Philippe Courtois, Kurt Delbeni, Scott Guthrie, Kathleen Hogan, Amy Hood, Rajesh Jha, Peggy Johnson, Terry Myerson, Kevin Scott, Harry Shum, Brad Smith, and Jeff Wiener. None of our work would be possible without the creativity and the talent of every single Microsoft employee and partner. Our board of directors, John Thompson, Reid Hoffman, Terry L. Listall, G. Mason Morfitt, Charles H. Noski, Dr. Helmut Panke, Sandra E. Peterson, Charles W. Scharf, John W. Stanton, and Padma Shri Warrior. My co-authors and I relied on a number of experienced publishing hands from the start to finish. Carl Weber brought a gifted touch both to the development of the manuscript and to the copy itself. Jim Levine, my agent, was always a calm guiding voice throughout the process. And our editor and publisher, Hollis Heimbach at HarperCollins, was encouraging before we had ever written a word, took a chance on our ideas once we jotted them down, served as our Virgil through the dark forest. The Microsoft Library and Archives team, Kimberly Engelchris, Nicole Partridge, and Amy Stevenson, provided invaluable fact-checking and a useful set of notes at the end of the book. I cannot thank my terrific staff enough for their daily support. Jason Graffey, Cynthia Thompson, Bonita Armstrong, Caitlin McCabe, Colette Stahlbaumer, Chad DeVries, Megan Gray, Jeff Fury, and the entire team. Our communications and marketing experts, including Frank X. Shaw, Bob Bijan, Steve Clayton, Doug Dawson, and John Cerrone and their teams. This group was invaluable in reading the manuscript, partnering with HarperCollins, and getting the word out about the book. Special thanks to Matthew Penarzik in our legal department and to the many who contributed ideas and thinking throughout. Rolf Harms, John Tinter, Matt Booty, Alex Kipman, R. Preston McAfee, Justin Raw, Glenn Whale, Victor Haymeyer, Mike Tolfson, Nate Jones, Turi Winstein, Chinar Bobshetty, Michael Friedman, Krista Savor, Peter Lee, Eric Horowitz, Kate Crawford, Dana Boyd, Chris Bishop, Dev Stockhoff, John Seetoff, Abigail Sellen, Ryan Kalo, and Prem Pahalajarai, sports journalist Suresh Menon, the editor of Wisden India Almanac, suggested the cricket writing used in Chapter 2 and was kind enough to offer helpful guidance. Walter Isaacson not only provided early input for the book's direction, but also interviewed me on stage at the Aspen Ideas Festival, where we first announced the book. Tina Brown and her husband, Harold Evans, kindly hosted Anu and me at their wonderful home in New York City, where we discussed Microsoft and some of the ideas in the book with other writers and thinkers. Tim O'Reilly interviewed me on these topics at his innovative What's the Future conference in San Francisco, and I wish him the best of luck with his latest book. Lastly, I want to thank Greg Shaw and Jill Tracy Nichols, my co-authors, for their partnership on this project, for encouraging me to pursue it, for helping me to craft it, and for working with me to make it as meaningful as possible.
This is Sridhar Solanki. We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of Hit Refresh, the quest to rediscover Microsoft's soul and imagine a better future for everyone, by Satya Nadella, with Greg Shaw and Jill Tracy Nichols, and a foreword written by Bill Gates. This program was produced by Dion Audio. The director was Adam James Connor. Executive producer Suzanne Mitchell. Text copyright 2017 by Satya Nadella. Forward copyright 2017 by Bill Gates. Production copyright 2017 by HarperCollins Publishers. All rights reserved. Thank you for listening.